As god of war, Kratos, the Spartan, is accustomed to death, but a sense of loss is something different. After years of battle, he finds himself far from home, with a young boy he barely knows, and one final journey to spread the ashes of his dearly departed. But Kratos' shadow is one cast by the fires of war, and like all gods, his legacy is to mark the world with his passing. God of War is an action game and soft reboot of the original series where you play as Kratos, the titular God of War. As the game opens, we learn that in between the last trilogy and this one, Kratos has traveled all the way north to Scandinavia, lands of the Norse gods, where he has found a new life and even established a family. However, tragedy follows close at hand, and no sooner does the game start than we learn that Kratos' wife has died, and that he, as well as his demigod son, Atreus, must set out on a quest to scatter her ashes from the highest peak in the land. Challenges present themselves almost immediately. As the legendary home of the Norse gods, this mythological Scandinavia is filled with all manner of dangerous monsters. Everything from undead Draugr to giant wolves to trolls and ogres and even the looming shadow of other gods, who are none too pleased to have some foreign outcast stomping through their backyard. Thankfully, Kratos is more than capable of handling himself. Gameplay-wise, God of War is still a big, over-the-top action game. However, the pacing has been redesigned somewhat in this new entry to add more adventure and RPG elements. The emphasis this time around being on Kratos and Atreus and the journey that they undertake, as well as the relationship that evolves between them, ultimately making it more similar to a contemporary open-world action game. In the beginning, the game is divided into a series of discrete levels. However, as you explore, you eventually uncover a large hub area that connects all of the game's various locations. New areas unlock naturally as you complete the game's story missions or as you acquire new items and abilities. In between scripted story missions, you will have the option to explore small side areas in order to collect treasure, complete quests, or face optional challenges. As you explore the world and defeat enemies, you will be rewarded with experience, money, and crafting materials. Experience can be used to unlock new attacks in Kratos' skill tree, or to improve existing special attacks that you have already acquired. Money and items can be used to purchase new armor and weapon upgrades, which can then be equipped or mixed and matched as you see fit. After certain story segments, you'll even acquire new magic items, which will either provide you new abilities in combat or unlock new areas in the game world. Now, as for game positives, God of War has many, and as it is not my inclination to list them all, I'm just going to try and hit the highlights. For starters, the presentation is fantastic. The game's environments and character models look fantastic, the music is stupendous, frame rate is incredibly smooth, and above all, the voice acting is damn near perfect for the characters. And that part is important because one of the game's other big highlights is its story, which came as a complete surprise to me. I don't know who it was that suggested they take the brooding, testosterone-filled man-child that was Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, and turn him into a haunted father figure struggling with his own complicated regrets, but I applaud them, because it actually worked. The plot is fantastically dramatic, filled with themes of consequence and the legacy between parents and children, and the tragedy that can be born of trying to control that legacy. Special commendation has to be paid, in particular, to those writers and developers who were in charge of Atreus, Kratos' son. Normally, taking your hulking action star and teaming him up with a child is a sign of desperation. Here, it actually manages to be the emotional core of the entire game. These two characters have excellent chemistry, and their journey over the course of the game as father and son is both very well plotted and sublimely satisfying. But the game's strongest element, and the real reason that it deserves the title of God of War, is the game's combat system, which is thankfully the best the series has ever seen. Right away you'll notice that the camera has been shifted from a fixed position to a third-person angle. And this is important because combat is now much more personal, much more immediate. Enemies will attack you from multiple directions, and you need to be constantly moving and paying attention to your foes in order to best defend yourself. Kratos' primary weapon has also been changed. This time around, he starts the game not with sweeping chain blades, but with a powerful battle axe. And while you won't be unlocking as many weapons over the course of the game this time around, the versatility of each individual weapon has been massively expanded. And Kratos' mighty Leviathan axe is the signature example of this. Not only can you string together light and heavy attacks in order to build combos or juggle enemies, but Kratos can also at any time throw the axe as a ranged attack. And not only that, you can, with the tap of a button, immediately call the axe back to your hand to continue the fight. An ability that, while maybe not being original, presents you with fantastic amounts of utility. Having a single weapon that you can use for both short and long-range attacks is incredibly useful. In addition to being able to retaliate against ranged opponents, it also has applications outside of combat. Kratos can use his axe to solve puzzles, disable traps, or even open doors if it so suits him. In addition, your weapon can be equipped with a variety of upgrades that change how you play. Special gemstones can increase your attack or defense or even your luck. There are also unique runes which can be placed on your axe and then activated to either buff your attacks, deal damage, or unlock special moves. Combat is delightfully frantic thanks to a fantastic variety of enemies. There's a great selection of monsters, each with their own different abilities that require you to learn their tactics so that you can know when to attack or block or parry or when to just get the hell out of the way. The game also continues the series tradition of unnecessarily violent boss battles, filled to bursting with cutscenes and QuickTime events. And while we're on the subject of combat, special commendation needs to be paid again to whoever was in charge of developing Atreus. Kratos' son is like a lot of contemporary NPCs where he does not need to be protected and during combat will actually take care of himself. But in this case, he'll actually do more than just defend himself. He'll actually help you, sometimes to a significant degree. You can, on command, tell Atreus to fire arrows at enemies, which gives you an additional tactical option for dealing with ranged or armored foes. And Atreus has his own skill tree as well, which, when upgraded, will allow him to disable or occasionally even defeat some minor enemies. His assistance is an almost unnecessary advantage in a game that's already all about heaping increasing amounts of power and flexibility onto the player. As I mentioned before, the game has almost nothing to complain about. However, in the interest of due diligence, the first of my almost nothing complaints is the matter of the game's side quests. To its credit, the game has an impressive amount of extra dungeons, islands, and arenas that you can explore in between the main story missions. Unfortunately, they're all pretty repetitive, most of the time just being iterations on the instruction of travel to this location, defeat a bunch of enemies, collect an item. And while in most open world games that would be incredibly frustrating, since God of War is primarily an action game, it's, in this case, forgivable. That being said, my almost legitimate complaint is on the nature of the game's storytelling. Without intentionally getting too deep into spoilers, God of War has an unusual story structure in that, for an action game, there's not really a primary antagonist. Now sure, there are enemies, there are bosses, there's plenty of foreshadowing about Odin and Ragnarok and the war between the giants and the Aesir from ages past, but the game itself is not about any of that. This is a road story. Our characters are not motivated by revenge, they are not trying to defeat anyone, they're not trying to claim any great prize, they are just trying to get to a location. Most of the challenges they face along the way are incidental, involving people who are dealing with their own separate problems, and Kratos just happening to arrive at the worst possible time. Which, again, for an action game, is an unusual story structure. Which theoretically should have been disastrous for the game's plot, but which God of War manages to mostly sidestep by tying its plot arc to the interaction between Kratos and Atreus and the growth of their relationship over the course of the game. It's a trick that probably wouldn't work if we weren't being reintroduced to these characters, but in this case manages to work well enough.
Close your heart to it. Come then.
So that's God of War, an excellent action game that actually manages to combine RPG elements, open world gameplay, and storytelling into one satisfying package. I would give it 4 out of 4 stars and a hearty recommendation. I would recommend this to fans of the original trilogy, fans of action games, even just fans of high-quality adventure and exploration titles. It's a great game, and I hope a sign of future prominence. Alright, well, thanks for listening, and until next time, to thine own self, be true. See ya.